Hey, what's up? This is Mia, and today I'm going to show you how I made and applied single cording to my dining room chairs. So let's begin. Alright you guys, so today we are on another project, me redesigning my dining room table and chairs. So as you can see, this is the first table I had before, but since then a lot has happened. The other table got damaged, plus it was really big for the space, so it was time for me to find another one. Luckily, I had in my storage a set of 4 chairs and a table I ended up getting from the Goodwill. Now, I bought both of these items totally separate, but the goal was to actually paint them and design them to make it look like it's all one set. So far, I've already repainted and reupholstered the chairs. Now I need to paint the table and also put a finish on the chairs and apply cording. So that's what we're going to do today. So for those that don't know, cording is actually the trim that goes around the fabric when you finish upholstering an area. And usually you use cording to really cover up the staples and to give that piece a finished look. This is a video of pretty much how the backs of my chairs really look up close. So I'm going to show you how I not only made the cording, but also applied it as well. So as usual, before we get started, let's cover the materials that we need. So before we start making the cording, one of the first things we have to do is actually measure the chair that we're going to put the cording on. So for me, I measured both the front and the back of my dining room chairs. I'm not going to apply it to the seat just because I just didn't feel like applying it. Next, we're going to cut the fabric in order to make the cording. Now, I went about this 2 different ways. I did one way diagonally, and then I did another way straight across. Now, when I say diagonally, I don't mean a 45-degree angle. You want it in an angle just enough where it is touching both the side and the bottom of the fabric. Now, I did this with a 36-inch ruler. They do have cording rulers out there that's about 60 inches. I didn't purchase that yet, but when I do, I'll let you guys know. But it was simple. I took a ruler and I took a marker and I literally marked it off. Now, if you choose to go across the fabric instead of in an angle, it's the same concept. I think most people decide to do it in an angle because they feel like they don't waste as much fabric, but really it's your preference on what you want to use. Another thing to keep in mind is that when you do go across, it's more square at the ends, which is not necessarily a bad thing because you have to lay the strips across each other, and I'll show you that shortly. Now it's time to cut the strips out. So as you guys know, I love to mark up my fabric because I just feel like it's such a cleaner look when it comes to cutting, because you're not making zigzags and it just leaves less room for error. So simply just take some scissors, start cutting the strips out and put them to the side. I like to put them all in the same direction. Sometimes I'll put a dot on one end so I can know which direction that the fabric is going. But the basis of it is that you want to make sure that it's organized, so as you put it together, it looks all as one piece. Once that is done, now we can move on to actually connecting the pieces to make it one long piece. One more thing before we get to sewing, I wanted to show you the type of foot that I'm using. Now you can use a regular walking foot, but I also purchased a cording foot. This is very beneficial because it keeps the cording and the fabric right in the space perfectly, so you can just get that perfect straight line down the cording. Like I said, you could do this with the walking foot, but having a cording foot is so much easier. So now, in order to connect the fabric to make it one long piece, you want to make sure that you take 2 end pieces of fabric, lay them on top of each other with the right side in, and you want to make sure it's like in an L design, because when you sew it, you're going to sew in an angle so that when you fold it or unfold it, it'll look like one long piece. Since I had some scraps left over, I went ahead and used this as an example to kind of give you an understanding of what it'll look like when it's done. So it may not be perfectly even on both sides. Once you make the fabric as long as you need for the cording, now it's time to put the cording in the fabric. Real simple process. Sit the cording in the middle of the fabric and fold it over, and then put it under your cording foot. Now that you see where the cording goes, you can definitely see why I recommend getting a cording foot, because with the walking foot, one of the things that you would have to deal with is the cording slipping out on occasion, so having that foot really does help. Now when I start to sew, you notice that first of all I backstitched just to make sure that everything was good and nothing would fly out. Also, what I'm doing is wrapping it around as the cording is going through. Now I have a very long piece of cording that I'm using because I'm doing it for like 4 chairs. So I wanted to make the length pretty long. But as you notice, once I get to the top of the cording or the base of the cording, my fingers press down on the fabric to make sure it stays in place, and then my other hand is kind of just wrapping the fabric around. Now you could do this with sewing needles, but I just like freestyling it like this. I'm actually fine with the way it goes. Now that we're almost done with making the cording, I wanted to show you what, one, it looks like when it's done, and two, what I do at the very end. So when you're wrapping the cording around, you want to make sure you give it a finished look when the 2 pieces meet. And one of the things I do when I get towards the end, I actually cut the cording a little shorter than the end of the fabric so that I can wrap it around when I'm about to glue it to the chair. This is what the cording should look like when you're done. One long, smooth piece. Now that the cording is done, before we glue it onto the seat, we have to make sure that we remove any excess fabric. Now, this can be a tedious process, but I promise you it'll look a lot better when you're about to glue it on. You don't, as much as possible, you don't want like any extra fabric sticking out and showing its ugly head, so just go ahead and cut the excess off and call it a day. Now here's the fun part, attaching it to the seat. So if you remember earlier when I said to make sure that you had some extra fabric on the end and you cut the cording real short, well, this is the reason why. When you take a little glue and you put it on the end and you fold it over, it actually gives it a finished look, because you don't want the white cording to show at the tips of your cording on the chair. It becomes very noticeable. But if you take that excess fabric, add some glue to it, flip it over, fold it over, it gives it a cleaner look when both pieces come together. It makes it look continuous. So when you're applying the cording to the chair, I want you to take a few things into consideration. First of all, a simple way to do it is a hot glue gun. Now you can do it with a staple, but I only use a staple gun when I'm using like double cording, which I'll show you in another video of that at a separate time. But typically it's easier to apply with a hot glue gun. Please note that the hot glue gun is hot, so it does melt the glue and it can get on you and it can burn you a little bit if you're not careful. Nothing to the point where you gotta run and have your mom kiss your boo-boo or anything, but it hurts. It smarts just a little bit. Now, it also gets very stretchy, stringy, so you can just kind of pull it apart. If it's getting on your hand, it can get off your hand very easily. But another thing, it dries very quickly, so you're not in a messed up situation when you're doing this. It's very easy to clean up. Just keep in mind that it's hot, it gets stringy, and it dries fast. Now that I got that out of the way, now as you can see, what I'm doing is putting the glue from the glue gun in the crevices where cording is going to go. Now you have to move kind of quickly because it dries fast, but I apply a nice amount of glue where it needs to go, and then I go ahead and wrap the cording in there. I don't put the whole glue around the whole piece because by the time you get your cording, as I said, it's gonna dry. I keep saying it's gonna dry because this stuff really dries fast. It's hot and it dries fast, but it's a pretty cool process. Now when it comes to the corners, this is where the method I showed you earlier comes into play. When you create your cording fabric and your cording in that way that I showed you earlier, it makes it a lot easier to cut around the curves than if you were to just do it straight head on the whole way. So being able to make it that way just made it a lot easier. Now when it comes to the application of glue, I'm still trying to master doing too much and doing too little. It's so easy with these glue guns to put too much glue on it and overdo it, and it becomes a burden when you're trying to pull it off and redo it. So just be careful, light touch, and just move fast, and not so fast, but you get what I'm trying to say. So once you get to the end, you want to apply the same method that I showed you at the beginning. You leave more fabric than you do cording, so you can apply a little glue, wrap it around so that it can have a continuous look. Once you do that, then you let it dry and you're pretty much done with adding the cording to the seat. And voila, there you have it. So this is 1 out of 3 chairs. I still have to do the front of 3 of the chairs and the backs, which I may do double cording so I can make a video to show you guys. Anywho, this is the after and the before, and it was pretty dope to do. It was a real simple process. Definitely need to learn, or I need to get used to doing it more often, but with the projects we got, you'll be seeing me do this more often. Anywho, if you have not already, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and that notification bell. We still have more videos coming up, and follow us in the links in the description. So with that being said, you all have an awesome day and stay super-tastic.